Hey everyone, and welcome back to Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite. I am your host, Jim Chapman, and welcome to the very first edition of our Bad Boy series, and we got a tough one for you straight out of the gate, so let's get into it. Now, a couple of things that led me to start out with this particular episode. First, I am a huge fan of mixed martial arts, so much so I actually started watching the UFC way back in the mid 1990s in UFC #1. And I have actually watched every single UFC event since, nearly 400 of them. So I already knew this story and most of the details. Second was the fact that this episode really centers around the domestic violence issue that seems to become more and more prevalent these days and what that can eventually lead to. It's my hope that if, God forbid, a listener out there is in this situation and can relate to this story, maybe this will give you the help you need to get the courage to get out of this situation. So currently the UFC is worth several $billions, but it was not always that way. In 2001, the UFC was sold to the Fertitta brothers, who were Las Vegas casino owners, for $2 million. And by 2005, that investment was in the hole to the tune of nearly $40 million. Now, the CEO at that time, who is still the CEO today, was a guy by the name of Dana White. And I've actually met Dana White. And in a last-ditch effort to save the company, he had an idea to pitch the show called The Ultimate Fighter, where up-and-coming MMA fighters would compete for a contract with the UFC. Now, this was at a time when reality TV was huge. It was everywhere. Big Brother was a huge, just gigantic show, really. You had Survivor out there, another gigantic show. And the UFC, they were trying to maybe piggyback off of that and create their own show. And a network existed called Spike TV, which was a network marketed for men. And the UFC, they're thinking it couldn't be more perfect for us. So they pitched this reality show and Spike TV hated it. So the UFC said, well, what if we pay for all the production and y'all just put it on your show, on your channel? Well, they were good with that. So they agreed to air The Ultimate Fighter, and long story short, it not only saved the UFC, but it became a huge profit generator and completely reversed the history of the UFC. So much so, y'all, that the UFC was sold to a big conglomerate a couple of years ago for over $2 billion from a $2 million investment. Unbelievable. Now, what does all that have to do with the story that I'm going to tell you today? Well, in 2007, the world was introduced to a fighter by the name of Jon Koppenhaver, whose nickname was War Machine, through the Ultimate Fighter franchise. He appeared on The Ultimate Fighter 6, and War Machine was a fitting nickname for this guy. If you were to picture a fighter, War Machine was what you would picture, completely chiseled physically and intimidating looking. He even had a tattoo of a hand grenade on the side of his neck. And as you look into his background, which during the filming of The Ultimate Fighter 6, he kind of opened up on, he had a tough go of it early on in life. Koppenhaver was born in the Los Angeles suburb of Simi Valley on November 30th of 1981. His father was an officer for the Los Angeles Police Department, and his mother worked as a nurse and later became a work-at-home mother. But she fought a very bad drug addiction. Koppenhaver would often take care of his younger brother and sister. And when he was 13, Koppenhaver suffered a pretty significant trauma when he unsuccessfully performed CPR on his father after he suffered a heart attack at their home and died. Now, eventually he became estranged from his mother a few years later and tools around. He gets into a lot of street fights and he spends a lot of time in and out of jail for those type of things. And in the year 2000, he put the fact that he enjoyed actually getting into fights to use when he started training at Ken Shamrock's legendary Lion's Den. Now, Ken Shamrock, he was a legend in MMA. He's one of the founding fathers, and I guess he saw a lot of himself in Koppenhaver, and he tried to take War Machine under his wing. But War Machine would do what he always did, it seems, up until that point and beyond. And he would fuck over Ken Shamrock by getting with Shamrock's 17-year-old daughter when War Machine was in his 20s. Now, after the story I'm about to tell you became public, Shamrock was quoted as saying this: "The thing that is sad about this is that I started Jon. When he first came into MMA, I'm the one who broke him in San Diego. I had issues with him. My 17-year-old daughter, and Jon was like 20-something years old at the time. He took her to Mexico and left her over there. He then ended up disappearing, and I haven't seen him since. He always has been hiding from me because he knows if I see him, I will break his neck. He's always had an issue with this, and the guy needs help. He doesn't need to be doing it on his own. He needs to be appointed by the court. They need to put him in some sort of rehab where he starts understanding, because it doesn't have anything to do with him naturally. It has to do with him out partying and doing things he shouldn't be doing. He needs help. They need to get him off the street." So that was after what I'm about to tell you took place. So Shamrock is saying this in hindsight, but ran off with that man's 17-year-old daughter and left her in Mexico. That right there told you something ain't right. Something's a little off with War Machine, right? But despite all these obstacles, in 2007, War Machine did manage to get on The Ultimate Fighter 6 after another fighter got hurt, and this would springboard War Machine into popularity. He didn't win The Ultimate Fighter. As a matter of fact, he lost his very first fight, but due to his look and the skills that he had, the UFC signed him to a contract anyway. Remember, I told you he looks like a total badass, and he is for all intent and purposes. Now, you would think this would put him on the right track. I mean, he's making some money. He's popular online. But again, you can't fix dumbass people sometimes. And War Machine could not keep his ass out of trouble. In September 2nd of 2007, Koppenhaver was found guilty of striking a Los Angeles man in the face and choking him unconscious during a parking lot scuffle. In February of 2008, he was sentenced to 3 years of probation and 30 days of community service, avoiding the possible felony charge and accompanying prison time that would go along with it. Then, in February 22nd of 2008, Koppenhaver pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor charge of assault and battery, and he was fined and sentenced to probation. That same year, he legally changed his name to War Machine after a legal dispute with a wrestling entertainment company over the use of his nickname. Now, he was an average fighter at best among the stars of the UFC, but he's still among the stars of the UFC and other MMA promotions. But even with all that, even with his look and everything that went along with it, the UFC, they got tired of all this shit and all these arrests and having to baby this guy, and they eventually release Jon Koppenhaver. So War Machine fights for some other organizations, and in 2009, while still fighting, War Machine enters the adult film industry, actually filming his first scene with adult film star Riley Steele. In his announcement on Twitter, he proudly stated that he cannot believe he is getting paid to do two of his favorite things, fight and fuck. And incidentally, War Machine, very active Twitter guy throughout his time prior to his arrest and even since his arrest, and we'll get into that. But the trouble was not over for War Machine, even in 2009, even though he's getting paid to do his two favorite things, as you just said. In August of 2010, Koppenhaver was sentenced to 1 year in the county jail for a felony assault conviction stemming from a bar fight in Point Loma, California, as well as an additional fight at a bar in Pacific Beach, which is by San Diego. He was imprisoned in San Diego's George Bailey County Detention Facility, mostly in solitary confinement. And after going to jail, War Machine maintained his Twitter account even in jail, as well as a blog documenting his time in jail. So on February 1st of 2012, it was announced via War Machine's Twitter that he would be serving another year of jail time due to preceding events, quote unquote. He was released on October 29th of 2012 after serving nearly 2 years and 2 months in jail. Now, sometime between his first and second jail stints, which he only lasted out of jail 7 months, he was married to a girl from Hungary, but she got deported during his second stint, and that was it. And there's not a whole lot about it. So here he is, the quintessential bad boy, right? And if you were arguably the most beautiful porn star in the industry at the time, Christy Mack, he was irresistible. But Christy Mack, she was not always a porn star. She was born Christine Mackaday on May 9th of 1991 in Chicago, Illinois. And she grew up in Edinburgh, Indiana, which is in what you would consider small town America. Only 4,000 residents, and not the type of place you would expect the top porn star in the world to have been raised. She was a cheerleader at her high school. And right out of high school, she gets married to her high school sweetheart. She was just 18 years old at the time. But Christy had a very unique look and unique taste. She was very fond of tattoos. She actually got her first at 16 years of age. And she was known for the styles of her hair. She actually cut her hair kind of in a mohawk style, but it sounds really crazy. I'm telling you, she pulled it off. She looked absolutely beautiful with it. But that was her look. It was kind of that grungy beauty look. And it was through that look that she got discovered. It led to a modeling gig in Miami and a divorce less than 2 years into her marriage. And that eventually led to adult films for Christine Mackaday, whose film name was Christy Mack. Now, although she looked like a wild child, Christy was actually pretty straight-laced outside of, the whole having sex on camera for money thing. And she did not drink, smoke, or do drugs of any kind. So in 2012, she gets into the porn industry at 20 years old. And a year later, she's winning every award in the industry, including Newcomer of the Year. But as much success as she was seeing, her life was about to take on a collision course that would nearly kill her. So in April of 2013, Christy Mack gets a phone call from Hustler magazine. They said they had a popular MMA fighter by the name of War Machine who was doing a photo shoot in the magazine, and they wanted her to appear in the photo shoot with him. So after negotiating, Christy went to the photo shoot, and as she described, sparks flew. Now, that particular day, she was suffering from a nasty bout of pneumonia. And War Machine, he, being the gentleman he is, right, offers to go to her hotel room and take care of her. And she figured, he's just trying to bang me. She made it clear over the phone, we're not going to have sex, but if you want to come over and hang out, that's fine. He agreed, and he showed up at her hotel room, and they talked for hours over pizza, and Mac was absolutely hooked on War Machine. So she falls fast and she falls hard for War Machine, and he seemed to have fell fast for her as well. It was not long before they even got tattoos signifying their relationship, with War Machine having a huge tattoo on his neck that said Mac, M-A-C, across it, and Christy having one on her back and shoulder that said property of War Machine. So here is a clip of an interview they did on the MMA Hour discussing the tattoos, and listen closely because there's an eerie premonition of what was to come for the relationship.
Did that hurt though? That seems like it would really hurt your Adam's apple.
You know what? The Adam's apple, I thought it was going to hurt. It didn't hurt.
He doesn't have an Adam's apple.
He doesn't?
Non-existent.
Oh.
But right here, like under the jaw was where it really hurt though. The Adam's apple wasn't that bad.
And if things don't work out for, God forbid any reason, you could just say you're a Mac, like you're a Mac daddy.
Yeah. But I just told her what I would do is I would just kill her and then I'll put rest in peace.
It's fair enough, really.
I'll put rest in peace, Mac. Then I was like, this is a memorial to my dead girlfriend. They don't know what happened to her. She's dead.
I mean, honestly, I would probably deserve it.
So there you have it. And did you pick that up? That little joke at the end? Keep that in mind. Now, times were not always good for the couple. They were on and off again constantly. So here's Christy Mack on the Holly Randall Unfiltered podcast describing what those early months dating War Machine was like.
War Machine had been tweeting me because Twitter was huge back then in 2013.
Yeah.
Woo. He had been tweeting me and I never gave him any sort of attention. I was a very private person. I still am a very private person, but back then I didn't want to be involved with anyone with any notoriety. I didn't want to distract myself from, saving up my nest egg and preparing for my future. But eventually I gave in when I got an offer from Hustler. Hustler said, the magazine, they said, we have an opportunity to shoot with this guy who's an MMA fighter, but the only way he will do the photo shoot is if you're in it too. And I said, well, how much are you going to pay me? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, we were hoping that it would just be, a trade for publishing. And I was like,
it sounds like Hustler.
Absolutely the fuck not.
I love Hustler. I love Larry, but sounds like them.
No. So I was like, well, if you want to actually take this seriously and you want either of us or both of us, you're going to have to pay me. So they ended up paying me. We did the shoot and I met him and he was a very intense character, like a larger than life personality, loud, just very fun. And he was very respectful of me and my boundaries on that shoot. I was a little under the weather. This is before, I think it was a few days before my 20th or 21st birthday. And I had just moved out to Vegas. I was under the weather. It turns out I had pneumonia and kidney stones.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that was fun. But I was young and afraid of doctors. So
you're like, I can handle this.
Yeah, I was like, I got sick. And at the shoot, he was like, hey, I'm a little worried, that you're not feeling well. Can I come and check in on you later? And I was like, oh, that's very nice, actually. Like, that'd be great. You can come over to my hotel room, but we're not having sex. Yeah. And that was like the first thing I laid it out. Like, we're not having sex. We just banged for this magazine. We're not doing it. And he said, okay, that's fine. Let me bring you some food. Make sure you're okay. And so he did. And we kept in contact and we were texting. He made sure that I got back to Vegas okay, because I had driven back and forth. And we just kept in contact. And my mom was like, wow, that's a really nice guy. He's really looking out for you and making sure you're all right. Like, maybe you should look into this a little more. And within the next 2 months, he had just love bombed me and made me feel like the most important person in the world, really put me up on a pedestal, told me he would do anything for me. And he had been pursuing me for well over a year at this point. So I truly believed it. And from there, it just blew up. We decided to enter in a relationship and we went public with it within a couple of months. Everyone loved it. It was salacious, a porn star and an MMA star. Really just being messy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because everyone loves a messy couple on Twitter.
Yeah.
Like, we live for it. And I was the messy couple. And I was young and I was jealous because, you know, he would hit on other women, and this whole time he was sleeping with other women. And I didn't know. I suspected it. But, and I was jealous. So I would go on Twitter and be like, how dare you? I'm leaving you on Twitter. And it's like, I'm 21 years old.
Yeah.
Like, 21-year-olds should not have access to the internet.
Yeah.
And so we would go back and forth, on and off couple for a few months. And the first time that he hit me, we had just gotten back from a trip, and something had set him off that he had seen on Twitter. His roommate was giving us a ride back to his apartment. We were in the back seat, and he slapped the shit out of me.
Wow.
Right in front of his roommate. And his roommate just parked the car and left. And just left him in the back seat hitting me. And I was like, oh, it makes you feel like a big man? Hit me again. And I would say things like that because that's what gave me power. It's what made me feel like I was more in control of the situation. Like, okay, do it again. You think you're hurting me? Do it again then. Make you feel like a big man.
Yeah.
And so then I would leave him, and then he would send me flowers or something and tell me he was sorry and bring me food again and just show me attention, positive attention. And then I'd fall back into the ways because I was so young and I had never seen any domestic violence in my life before. I didn't think that it was happening to me. I was conflating his abuse with passion.
Yeah.
And if he cares about me this much, enough to really hurt me, like, the ways that I was kind of validating it in my own mind, I can't see why I was thinking that way then.
Yeah.
But, you know, in retrospect, everything is easier, and I should have left and I should have stayed away. And there's so many things that I could have done differently.
Wow. So early on in this relationship, the signs were there. And if you notice in that clip, even now, after all those things that War Machine did to her, which we will get into, she's still kind of blaming herself. You heard her bring up in that clip that she would get jealous of women commenting on his Twitter, almost like she's excusing the slap in the face that he gave her. But that was just the start of the violence. In this next clip, Mac discusses the escalation of that violence and why it took her so long to leave War Machine. And here's what that sounded like.
Over the next year or so, we would go back and forth in and out of the relationship, and he would hit me, usually open-handed, and choke me out, and, you know, things like that. Very serious things. But to me, I was like, oh, it's not that bad. And he had ended up breaking a couple of my teeth, like chipping them, and, you know, left bruises all of the time. And I still kept coming back.
Yeah.
And then I made the decision to really leave him. And we had completely separated our things. He lived in San Diego. I lived in Las Vegas.
Were you scared to leave him? Like, did he ever threaten to hurt you if you left him?
Always. I remember laying in bed with him in San Diego, and after one blowout over a straightener of all things, a hair straightener, he had tossed me into his fireplace and broke off a tile on my forehead. And I remember laying in his bed, screaming and crying in so much pain. And he told me, like, I will kill you. I have friends in the Hells Angels. I will send them after you and your family. You will die.
Jesus Christ.
Oh, yeah. And he told me this different versions, and he would, I don't know if he was actually texting people or just pretending to text people. He's like, I'm going to tell them right now. And, you know, you don't know how to react like that with that fear looming over you at all times. You don't know what's true and what's not. You don't know what kind of powers or persuasion he has as another public figure. So I stayed. So I was very afraid of him. But I did make the decision to leave, and I started seeing another guy. I cut it off with him and kept a friendship with him. And that
With John.
Not with John.
Oh, okay.
With the other guy that I was seeing.
Gotcha.
And he lived in Las Vegas as well.
Now, this is what I would call the typical stages of domestic violence. Maybe it starts out with a smack, then it grows to a punch, then you say you were going to leave, and the threats start, and then violence escalates even further, and then you're getting fireplace tiles broken over your fucking head, and your teeth get chipped. And credit here to Christy Mack that she eventually does leave, but she does not move on. She stays friends with War Machine. They would even continue texting back and forth, and she even admits they would flirt back and forth over these texts often. This continued contact, even just through phone calls and text, when you're dealing with this piece of shit like War Machine, bad idea. And on August 8th of 2014, the decision to not completely cut ties with War Machine nearly killed her. And before I get into it, I need to tell you about Corey Thomas. Corey was really nothing like War Machine. He owned a successful business in Las Vegas, and he had his shit together. He was way more passive than War Machine, and although he was not a high-level MMA fighter, he did train for a couple of years in MMA, and he was a wrestler in high school. He was physically in shape, muscular, and although on August 8th of 2014 they were no longer dating, they were still very good friends when Christy called Corey to see if he would help her pack for a convention in Las Vegas the next day. And he was more than happy to do so. He still loved Christy and really wanted to be her boyfriend again. They stay up late. They're getting all this stuff ready, and it's so late in the night. They got to be up early the next morning, and he decides to stay over. She allows that, and they get into bed together, although they don't have sex. He just sleeps next to her. So they work all this out. Corey lays down with Christy in the bed to get some sleep before helping her set up at that convention in just a few hours. And about 40 minutes later, 911 would receive a call. And I want to warn you before I play this clip, it's very disturbing and it could be triggering to some listeners. And it's a bit muffled, but it paints a picture of the pure rage in War Machine. So here it is, and then we're going to talk about what you heard.
911 emergency services, 6163, City State, Tiger Removal. What, can you hear me? Anyone hear me?
All right. So what happened to trigger that call? Again, this can be disturbing for some listeners. Christy Mack and Corey Thomas were asleep. Christy, who had 2 pit bulls, heard them growling, as did Corey. She kind of opened her eyes, and it was at that very second the lights in her bedroom came on. And standing above her and Corey is War Machine. Corey, who is unfortunately laying right next to Christy at this time, opens his eyes, and the first thing he sees is War Machine mouthing the words, "What the fuck?" And then the fight breaks out. Now, before we get into it, Corey already has 2 major things going against him. First, he's waking up out of a dead sleep. I mean, this guy did not even have a second to think before War Machine was on top of him. Second, War Machine is a trained, world-class fighter. And not just trained to punch. He's trained to apply submissions, such as chokes, arm bars, leg locks, that are specifically designed to break limbs. Honestly, in a normal, everyday situation where Corey's faculties were at full force, he wouldn't stand a chance against a trained fighter of War Machine's caliber. And in no time, he finds himself fighting for his life. War Machine jumps on top of Corey, and he is raining down blows to Corey's face, a barrage of punches. Corey covers up. He's trying to protect himself. 15 fast, quick hits. Corey reaches up and he manages to grab the back of War Machine's neck, and he yanks him down, kind of to flatten him out. And y'all, this is to keep War Machine from punching him. It negates his ability, meaning War Machine's, to posture up and have any power behind those punches. But when Corey does that, and they are basically face to face with War Machine lying on top of him in that bed, War Machine bites him on the cheekbone. So Corey is fighting for his life on this bed, and at some point, War Machine bites his arm when Corey attempts to roll him over. So at this point, Corey uses his feet and basically is able to kick War Machine off of him. Corey then attempts to stand up, but War Machine does one thing Corey does not want him to do. He takes Corey's back and he starts applying what's known as a rear naked choke, basically a choke from behind, to cut off the oxygen supply to Corey's brain. The only thing Corey could do at this point is try to bounce War Machine's body off of him by running backwards into every wall that he could find. And that was the thuds you were hearing. When you were hearing those thuds in the 911 call, that was literally Corey running War Machine backwards into a wall. So they end up during all this in the bathroom, and that choke is getting deeper and deeper. And Corey knows, I'm about to die. I can't get out of this one. He starts to lose consciousness. And at the very last second, he's able to break that choke. He's able to get War Machine's arms from around his neck. Now, at this point, he notices War Machine looks like he's a little tired. He's a little winded. And War Machine is behind him, and he's still kind of holding him, but he's not able to choke him. And he starts interrogating him during all this. War Machine starts asking Corey, "Who are you?" Claiming that Corey was his girl and all this shit. And then he looks at Christy and he starts screaming at her and he says, "Tell him you love me. Tell him you're my girl," etc. And Christy, what's she doing? She's complying. "I love you. I'm your girl," all those sorts of things, because she knows if she doesn't say what War Machine wants her to say, he will kill Corey Thomas. So he then lets Corey up, and basically Corey says, "What do you want to do now? What are you going to kill me? What are we going to do?" And they come up with an agreement where War Machine basically says, "If I let you live, if I let you go, you better not tell a fucking soul about this. I know people who would kill you. My boys will come and kill you. I'm friends with the Hells Angels," all this stuff. And Corey does what, personally, I cannot believe this dude did. He gets his overnight bag from the side of the bed and he leaves the fucking house, leaving Christy Mack behind and War Machine keyed up like a fucking piano. The fight itself lasted nearly 12 minutes, which is a lifetime for a fight. Usually a fight is over in less than 2. So if you think the story ends there, that Corey left, police were called and they're on their way, well, you would be wrong. First of all, the police weren't on their way because the cell phone 911 call I played you cut off before the police could trace it. What I will tell you is that for the next 2 hours straight, Christy Mack would be nearly beaten to death. So about 4 a.m., police respond to a few 911 calls from Christy's neighbors. One of the neighbors reported that a bloody, naked woman was banging on their door, pleading for help. Other neighbors weren't sure what they were seeing, but they were reporting a suspicious person banging on their door in the middle of the night. When police arrive at the scene, they find Christy laying on the ground, bloodied, bruised, her eyes were swollen shut, and she was taken by an ambulance to Sunrise Hospital in Las Vegas. Now, about the time that Christy was transported to the hospital, police receive another 911 call, this one coming from Web Squad, which was a business that Corey Thomas owned, which was about 5 miles away from the scene. And when they arrived there, they find Corey Thomas, who was also bloodied and beaten the shit out of. And Corey told the officers that Christy's ex-boyfriend, War Machine, had gotten into the house while they had been sleeping and savagely attacked him while he was laying in bed. War Machine then allowed him to leave, and Corey did so thinking that Christy would be okay. Boy, that was bad judgment. He said that he didn't believe that War Machine was going to beat her. He felt like War Machine took all his anger out on himself. But the officers told him that Christy had been transported to the hospital, and they advised Corey that he needed to seek medical help too. And so he went. Now, let's talk about that for a second. I understand that this guy got his ass kicked, but I got to pull Corey Thomas's man card right here. Number one, you left her there with a guy who was obviously out of his mind at the moment. But okay, maybe you were scared. Whatever. You leave. You wait 2 hours to call the police? I just cannot imagine even leaving her there, much less not calling the police until 2 hours later. This makes no sense to me. It's outrageous. Of course, Corey Thomas, he knows full well the optics of that. And in order to save face, I guess, he goes on an interview with Primetime Justice, and he tries to lay out his reasons why he left and why he waited so long to call the police. And here is what that sounded like.
I asked you that question about leaving and about not calling the police. Do you feel guilt? Do you feel shame? Why did you not contact the police regardless of what threat he made against you?
So during our fight, while we're still fighting and towards the end of the fight, as I changed started the conversation, you know, she's in the background telling him that she loves him, that she was going to marry him today, and that he's his man, she's his man, and vice versa, you know, that whole conversation. And so I say to myself, why aren't the police here? Why hasn't she called the police? And I say to myself, it's time to start finding out what's going to happen. You want to kill me? You want to let me go? Because there's really two options. You either get busy and you get to killing me, or this is over. And if it's over, then we fought. And if she's your girl, then you guys obviously have some serious issues to work out.
So are you telling me,
the way I
Corey,
was raised with,
when you left, you were under the impression she was going to be okay?
Yeah. Two guys fight. That's the end of it. I've never hit a woman in my life. I never will. I was raised with three sisters and a single mother.
But Corey, you
don't do that.
You were a good friend of hers. Had she never told you anything about their relationship? I mean, this was one rocking and rolling relationship. She'd been beaten, she'd been bruised, she'd been cut. You didn't think that a guy who'd done that to her before might just take the boots to her after you?
That was a complete secret, and we were a lot more than friends at the time. We had been seeing each other and sleeping in, 2 months. I mean, 2 months of serious dating, and kept it all a secret from me, all of it. Even to the last text of her picture to him right before we got into bed, all came out in court. So that's complete misdirection on her side.
So Christy gets interviewed at the hospital by investigators, and she was so severely beaten that she could barely talk. Everything was slurred. And police would have to get her to repeat information twice just to make sure they got the information correct. Now, War Machine at this time, he's on the run, right? He has 7 warrants out for his arrest that included multiple counts of battery, assault, coercion. But the absolute narcissist that War Machine is, he can't stand the thought of everyone thinking this was his fault. I mean, he is the victim here in his mind. He walked in on her with a guy, right? And he turns to Twitter, his favorite outlet, to explain that and spin his narrative. At 8:14 a.m. that day, the same day all this went down, just hours after the attack, he tweets, "I can't believe this. I must be cursed." Then the next day at 5:06 p.m., he tweets, "At Christy Mac, I love you and I hope you're okay. I came home early to surprise you and help you set up for your convention. I can't believe what I found and can't believe what happened." Her fault, right? Then he tweets, "All I wanted was to surprise you and help you and do something nice. Now this, I'm so heartbroken in all ways. I will always love you." That's fuck. That is narcissism at its best, is it not? He's so heartbroken. Unbelievable. Then the next day at 10:45 p.m. on August 10th, while still on the run, he sends out a series of tweets, including, "I'm not a bad guy. I went to surprise my girlfriend, help her get set up for a show, and give her an engagement ring, and ended up fighting for my life. Then the cops will not give me fair play. They'll never believe me. Still deciding what to do, but at the end of the day, it's all just heartbreaking." Now, in every single one of these tweets, he's doing what abusers do, right? He is blaming the entire thing on everyone else but himself. And he is trying to play to Christy's emotions because he knows she's going to see those tweets by playing into her emotions and telling her how much he loves her. What a fucking dick. So news of all this, it gets around fast. And Dog the Bounty Hunter, he is personally appalled by what was all over the news, and he releases his own Twitter statement to War Machine directly. And he tweets, "Better to give all your excuses to the judge. You have 24 hours to turn yourself in, or I am coming for you." Now, Dog the Bounty Hunter then does a TV interview with HLN's Jane Mitchell, where he issues another warning to War Machine. And here's what that sounded like.
Right at the Dog, the Bounty Hunter, Dwayne Chapman. Dog, thanks for joining us. I understand you're live from an undisclosed location. Are you closing in on this man known as War Machine? And if so, how are you going to protect yourself? Because everybody's saying, including the cops, this guy is violent.
Well, yes, we're closing in, and we use non-lethal weapons. So we don't want to say we want him to resist, but let it be. So if he does, then he's still going to jail no matter what.
Well, this isn't his first run-in with the law. This guy has got a history. In 2009, he was arrested for felony domestic violence. He ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor. 2011, a club patron alleged that this guy beat him up, and there was a lawsuit, and now he's facing 7 charges. We've got to take a look once again at the injuries of this young woman, Christy Mack. I mean, this is brutal, and we're going to show you those pictures in a second. Does it make you angry that this guy who is a trained fighter, an MMA fighter, hits a woman?
Well, absolutely. He what has not been let out is that one of her statements was, as he was on top of her beating her, she could see her blood, splattering all over his face and into his mouth. And she said, "Dog, there was no referee to stop it. He just kept beating me and beating me." She thought for sure she was going to die. So this is what sparked our team to go after this guy. Number one, he's in our world, the world of the tough guy. Okay. So we have a lot of friends in the MMA world, and they're not like this. He's like a one MMA guy and uses that, to make it through his life and to bully people around. But, his days of bullying is almost over. He's got a friend waiting for him in prison by the name of Andrew Luster. And Luster
that's the guy you caught, the cosmetics era that you caught down in Mexico. Yes, I remember. I covered you on that story. Dwayne, let me watch another clip of your show, Catching Criminals on CMT, with you and Beth. And we're just going to roll through it and show it while I talk, because I want to get back to this investigation. This beating that this MMA star is being sought for happened in Nevada, in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, War Machine is apparently from San Diego. Cops thought maybe he might go to San Diego, but apparently not. So where the hell is he, Dog? And how are you going to track him down? He's been tweeting. So are you able to track his pings, or are you going with credit cards, or are you talking to his friends?
Well, it's a new world, and new things are happening. And for instance, on the social media, on Twitter, we've got, we were just figuring it out a minute ago. We've got about 400,000 Facebook, Twitter, people around waiting for him. We've got all the places he's ever been, gyms, restaurants, bars, anything he's ever done. We've got people stationed at every single spot. It's amazing what we can do now with these social networks. Every single person has got a picture of him. Everybody's on hold. They're all ready to dial in. All this guy has to do is make one mistake. The only way this guy can outrun us right now is to starve himself to death. And, that'll take about 47 days. So there's no way this guy is ever going to get away.
So the pressure is mounting. Local police, state police, the U.S. Marshals, and even Dog the Bounty Hunter are looking for this dude. Christy Mack's family and friends offer a reward for information leading to War Machine's capture. And Christy releases her first statement since the attack on her social media. And again, this is going to be hard to hear, and it may trigger some listeners, but it's stated, At about 2 a.m. Friday morning, Jon Koppenhaver arrived unannounced at my home in Las Vegas, Nevada. After he broke up with me in May, he moved out of my house and back to San Diego. When he arrived, he found myself and one other fully clothed and unarmed individual in the house. Without a single word spoken, he beat my friend. Once he was finished, he sent my friend away and turned his attention to me. He made me undress and shower in front of him, then dragged me out and beat my face. I have no recollection of how many times I was hit. I just know my injuries resulted from my beating. My injuries include 18 broken bones around my eyes. My nose is broken in 2 places. I'm missing teeth and several more are broken. I am unable to chew or see out of my left eye. My speech is slurred from my swelling and my lack of teeth. I have a fractured rib and a severely ruptured liver from a kick to my side. My leg is so badly injured I have not been able to walk on my own. I obtained several lesions from a knife he got from my kitchen. He pushed the knife into me in some areas, such as my hand, ear, and my head. He also sawed much of my hair off with a dull knife. After some time, the knife broke off of the handle, and he continued to threaten me with the blade. I believed I was going to die. He has beaten me many times before, but never this badly. He took my phone and canceled all of my plans for the following week to make sure no one would worry about my whereabouts. He told me he was going to rape me, but was disappointed in himself when he could not get hard. After another hit or two, he left me on the floor bleeding and shaking, holding my side from pain in my ribs. He left the room and went to the kitchen where I could hear him ruffling through my kitchen drawers. Assuming he was finding a sharper, more stable knife to end my life, I ran out of my back door, shutting it behind me so the dogs didn't run inside to tip him off. I hopped the fence to the golf course behind my house and ran into a neighboring house. Naked and afraid he would catch me, I kept running through the neighborhood knocking on doors. Finally, one answered and I was brought to the hospital and treated for my injuries. I would like to thank everyone for their support through this rough time. I'm healing fast and well, and I appreciate all the prayers and visits I've received over the past few days. After many months of fear and pressure to keep this man happy, although I fear for my life, I feel I can no longer put myself in this situation. The cheating by him nearly every day and almost weekly abuse is now more than I can stand. There's a $10,000 reward for the capture of Jonathan Koppenhaver. At this time, please report to your local police. Thank you, Christy Mack. So, as always in this case, you can run, but you can't hide. And War Machine is no exception. After nearly 8 days on the run, he is tracked down to an extended stay America hotel in Simi Valley. U.S. Marshals, they bust open the door, and there's War Machine waiting for them in a fighting stance. Now, the U.S. Marshals, they're like, fuck that. They yank out a taser, and they tase the piss out of him, and they take him into custody. And in the hotel room, they find a small amount of cash and pizza. Now, he was found in his hometown just a few miles from his home, and true to his word, Dog the Bounty Hunter was right on his trail, having just searched War Machine's home prior to his capture. And this all took place at 2 o'clock in the afternoon that day. So everyone in Simi Valley, where War Machine was from, saw it all go down. As a matter of fact, here's a clip from the local ABC affiliate following War Machine's capture.
All right, this is a brand new jailhouse photo of the San Diego MMA fighter known as War Machine. The manhunt to find him ended this afternoon when he was tased and arrested in Simi Valley. 10 News reporter Steve Fiorina is live downtown. And Steve, you talked to War Machine's neighbors who saw Dog the Bounty Hunter raiding his apartment.
War Machine works out at this gym here. Undisputed lives just around the corner, about a half a block. And he's recognized, but it was when Dog the Bounty Hunter showed up, that's when the neighbors all got revved up. U.S. Marshals arrested War Machine in Simi Valley for the reported beating a week ago in Las Vegas of his ex-girlfriend, porn star Christy Mack.
They opened the door, and then they were like, police, open the door. You heard the taser come out, and it was like, and I was like, oh my God, we got to get out of here. Oh my God. It was crazy.
And soon their prey was in handcuffs. The search for the mixed martial arts fighter included San Diego, with TV's Dog the Bounty Hunter on his trail. Neighbors seemed almost thrilled.
Dog the Bounty Hunter was parked over here at Puptown. They were making phone calls, and they were talking about, I believe now I know, they were going after War Machine.
And I see the Dog the Bounty Hunter, and I'm like, whoa, man, like, why is he here, you know? And then I see them go inside, bring all of his stuff. And it was loud, you know, but it was actually cool at the same time because the Dog the Bounty Hunter was here.
This surveillance video helped convict War Machine after a 2010 brawl at Thruster's Lounge in Pacific Beach. Hauled away then with a bag over his head because he had been spitting. He was sentenced to a year in prison. Removed from his apartment Thursday, 2 snake cages containing an eastern indigo snake and a rear-fanged musarana, slightly venomous but legal. County Animal Services has custody now. Over at Undisputed, where War Machine has been training for the past year and a half.
As of what I heard right now, it's heartbreaking.
You like him?
Love the kid. I love him. He knows that. All my fighters who I work with, you get a bond with them. You grow a bond. You spend more time with these guys than with your families.
War Machine is spending time in jail right now. His next step will be in court, extradition proceedings back to Nevada. Live downtown, Steve Fiorina, 10 News.
He was indeed extradited. And the shocking thing to me is that after his arrest, the amount of people that came out in support of this piece of shit was insane. Using the hashtag #FreeWarMachine, supporters took to Twitter to proclaim support for him, as well as to harass Christy in the process. They posted crude photos of her, include Photoshop photos of her bloodied and bruised face on top of one of her nude photos. They questioned the severity of her injuries after one supporter had posted a picture of her while she was out getting ice cream with a friend weeks after the incident. Christy even told reporters that she may not ever be able to live in her home again after War Machine supporters posted photos of her home online. She said she was fearful for her safety, and understandably so. So in September of 2014, War Machine pleaded not guilty to 32 felony charges, including 2 counts of attempted murder. And next week, I'm going to bring you inside that courtroom and the testimony. And we're going to start it with Corey Thomas next week. What kept him from calling police? The testimony of Christy Mack's mother. What warning signs did she see that Christy didn't? And even the testimony of Christy Mack herself, as she gives a second-by-second account of what she went through in those 2 hours that War Machine nearly beat her to death at her home. It's unbelievable. Remember to follow us on Apple Podcast or wherever you listen so that you can be notified the second our episodes drop. It'll alert you when we drop. All you got to do is hit that bell or subscribe button, or wherever you listen, they should have some way to do that. So please do that. Thank you so much for listening. Check out the Patreon. We are going to upload all kinds of extras on this case. You're going to want to check that out. We have some exciting things coming up just for our Patreon celebrities. Speaking of which, our top tier patrons, our global celebrities, quarterly gifts are going out throughout this month. So look for that. And if you're interested in joining us on that Patreon, you can check us out, patreon.com/exposedpodcastfiles. And until next time, for Exposed, Scandalous Files of the Elite, I'm your host, Jim Chapman. Much love.
yeah.